Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and transformational life coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Today, we're chatting with Susie Stonefield, a transformational creativity coach, grief midwife, expressive artist, and writer. Susie's work is so fantastic and beautiful, you guys. Truly, I cannot wait to share her and her story with you all today. Susie shares her personal story of coming out later in life, the challenges of supporting a child through significant medical issues, and the ongoing journey of caring for her aging mother. In this episode, you'll learn more about art journaling as a therapeutic practice, a modality Susie uses, teaches, and swears by herself, and how it can be a pivotal tool for processing grief and fostering your creativity. You'll also gain insight on the profound impact of being present as we're grieving. This is so important. I feel like I'm always preaching this. The importance of community and having people around us to witness us in our grieving process. And Susie offers valuable perspectives on how you can utilize art and art journaling to navigate your own grief journey. Susie is truly the perfect person to share resources for those who are interested in exploring art journaling and other creative grief work further. And I promise it is such a critical aspect of healing that you will not want to miss. I am so excited to dig into this one with you. Susie, welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I am so honored to have you here today. I am so glad to be connected with you in this unfortunate grief community that
Right.
we find ourselves in. I think we kind of got connected through the Get Griefy community that we're in, which is an amazing group of people, of fellow grief coaches, authors, podcasters, all the things.
Right.
And it's such an amazing group of people. But your story definitely hit home for me. But it's like we've had different experiences in a lot of ways, but so much of your approach to grief and your lens of grief and how you just so beautifully encompassed like creativity and all of that just really spoke to me. So I'm very excited to get into that with you and just welcome you to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our conversation too.
Yeah, me too. Well, I love to start off guest episodes just by having you tell everyone a little bit about yourself. So, just who you are, what you like to do for fun, just any kind of fun facts that people might not otherwise know about you.
All right. Let's see. I live in Northern California, and I came out of the closet really late in life. That's a big part of my story. But I also am a mom and raised three kids in Sonoma County. Um, and for fun, I like to knit and sing. I play the guitar. I'm a song leader and be out in nature, which is abundant here in beautiful Chico.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I grew up in Chico. I was gonna say because I know we talked about that a little bit, because I too am from Sonoma County, but it's beautiful out where you are. We definitely have some nature and things around here, but I feel like you have to go out a little bit more to the coast for it, and we have a lot of vineyards basically where I am,
Yes,
so
we
which is
have a lot
great,
of
and that's
almond.
beautiful too. But yeah, not as easy for putting your feet in the grass every once in a while, so to
Right,
speak.
right. All
Yeah,
right.
so I'm envious. But okay, well, there's multiple parts of your journey of grief and loss that I'd love to touch on, but because you mentioned, coming out at sort of kind of in your words at a later age. So I want to talk about all that, but I really want to give you the authority to kind of tell your story, so to speak, however you'd like to. So do you want to kind of just give everyone just kind of a high level overview, for lack of a better term, of just your experience with grief and loss? Because it is in some ways a little bit non-traditional, as a lot of people here I think that are listening experience death of a loved one and things like that. But there are, your beautiful example that there are many types of, grief that we have to kind of work through. And yeah,
Yeah,
so whatever you're comfortable sharing.
sure. I think it's really part of our culture to focus on the loss of a loved one as grief. Like that is what
Yeah.
grief is. And people don't realize there's grief in so many other life experiences. So I would say that the first grief experience beyond losing beloved people like my uncle, who was like my grandpa, died when I was 9, and
Mhm.
that was very impactful for me. But really, it was that one of my kids had a serious medical issue that required years and years of surgeries, 10 years of surgeries, 15 surgeries by the time he was 16. And frankly, he came out of that well. But throughout it, we weren't sure how it would turn out. And it really, of course, changed his life and our life. And as his mom, walking alongside him through this really scary and traumatic period of his life, where he lost a sense of that carefree, childlike naivete that the children you want to preserve in children. You
Yeah,
want them to feel
absolutely.
innocent. You don't want them to have to face their mortality.
Of
And he
course.
had to. And it changed him. It changed all of us. And that was really a place of very deep grief for me
Mhm.
as I grieved, sort of the loss of his innocence, and then worried a lot about the future for him and how it would
Yeah.
be. So I would say that was when actually I really dug into my creative process, was when I was going through that with him, and I discovered this thing called art journaling, and that actually has turned out to be my career, teaching people how to use that for grief. But what happened basically was I was working through my feelings about my son and of course all the other, ups and downs of life,
Sure.
and things started to show up in my art journals, pages started to show up in my art journals that had to do with a very deep and, to me at the time, very scary questioning of my sexuality. And I was in a marriage, it was a straight marriage, it was a solid marriage, it was loving, great husband.
Mhm.
But I wasn't happy, and I kept longing for some other true reality that seemed very unavailable to me.
Mhm.
So, a lot of the pages that I started doing in my art journals weren't just about my son, they actually ended up being about this exploration of this question.
Mhm.
And also, I could not deal with it. So I would sort of hide, I would cloak what I was working on, cloak it
Yeah.
in ways so that if anybody saw it, they wouldn't really know what it was that I was talking about. And
Wow.
years later, years and years later, when I did actually finally come out and I did a little retrospective of looking at my work, I thought, wow, it was, this truth was trying so hard to come out
Oh
a
my
lot.
god. Oh, I have chills as you're saying that. Wow.
It's
Oh,
I had built a whole life that was a great life,
yeah.
and I didn't feel like blowing it up. It seemed really
Mhm.
inconvenient, it seemed really selfish. I had little kids, a great husband, like I said, and it just seemed like, why would you do that? Why would you forsake that for this thing that seems true, but like, I don't know, I had never explored that when I was younger. And, and so when I did finally come out, there was a lot of grief because even though I was making this, I mean, I would say it was a choice for me to leave the comfortable life I had.
Right.
There was a lot of grief about doing that. There was a lot of grief about disrupting my family's situation. It was
Mhm.
about breaking my husband's heart and my children's hearts, and disappointing people. I That was something I thought I was doing, was disappointing people, and honestly, just upsetting people was not something I was looking, that was easy for me to do. So in terms of my grief story, there was grief around my child, and then there was grief around my truth and what I had to do to actually live into that truth.
Mhm.
And what's been really interesting for me is that I have learned that those were like the golden seeds of the future for me, of
Mhm.
being able to be more authentic and using the creativity, to work through my own things, but also what I know about grief and creativity, being able to use that to help and support other people who are on a grief journey, and which basically we all are at some point, more or less, in some
Yeah.
moments more or less. And then I'd say there's one more aspect to my grief story, which is that my mother is in her late 80s, and it is hard to get old. It is hard because you're losing all these dear people. She's losing a
Yeah.
lot of friends,
Mm.
and family members, and she's the matriarch of our family, and so she's lost all the family members who were her elders and
Aw.
equals in the family tree. And she has a lot of grief. She lives with a lot of grief, and I've come to realize that the work I do with grief has really benefited my relationship with her, because I'm really able to not be afraid of it and
Yeah.
have compassion, not try to sideswipe her with like cheer up or look on the bright side.
Mhm.
She's in grief, and she has every right to be
Yeah.
sad what she's lost. And also, like, the things that are starting to become more and more limited, and her vision going, her hearing going, and not being able to drive anymore. And she's a
Yeah.
fiercely independent person. So the I've come to really appreciate the work I've done with grief, because I'm able to really hold space for her in a way that I
Mm.
don't think I would have been able to had I not done this work for myself.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, these are all such powerful examples of, again, I guess I'll say non-traditional grief, but like has completely impacted your life, completely changed the trajectory of your life in many ways.
Mhm.
I was gonna just quickly because I'd love to kind of go back a little bit in a couple of those situations and talk to you a little bit about that. But one thing that came up for me as you were just talking about your mom, which thank you for bringing that up too, because that is absolutely something to be grieved, of course, on her side, right? Like not only just people, but her capacities or your independence, whatever. I mean, really, whatever age, I guess you are, right?
Yeah.
But someone said to me once, and I was so offended by this when they first said it. It was actually one of my mom's friends, and I think she could have said it a little bit better, but the point of her saying this was, you're like kind of like you're so lucky that your parents died earlier, so you didn't have to watch them get old.
Ugh.
Is like the gist of what she was saying, and I was like, okay. um pick your and choose who you say that to. I was not the right person to say that to. I didn't react poorly or
Anyone.
anything, but I was just like, "Wow, you have a lot of nerve." But you know what though?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even though her delivery, and again, I was paraphrasing that, but her delivery was not ideal, or kind of even saying that to me. She was saying it because she currently has a father in, I think, 90s, 80s, 90s, who's going through a lot of the same thing, not doing well. Um, and but I understand what she was saying. Like I do. There is something as a child that I can begin to comprehend in watching both of my parents die of cancer. It wasn't age, but it was, losing their capacities in some
Right,
way.
right.
Um, but that is, again, even though I don't like that she said that to me, she's not she's really not wrong in a lot of ways. That is heartbreaking to watch. That is excruciating for a child of any age to
Yeah,
watch. We are often used to our parents being, very very vital and like youthful, whatever. And it's so sad to see them begin to lose those things, them noticing that they're losing those things, so I want to hold space for that, because there is certainly something to be said about losing a loved one very quickly or unexpectedly or via a disease or,
right.
however many other ways there are to lose a person. Um, but a slow decline like that, or kind of bits and pieces sort of withering away, that is just It's just awful, and we're not comparing any other types of loss here because none of it can really be compared, but anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that really is so heartbreaking, and just because they're getting older, and even if it's on paper the natural progression of things, that doesn't make it easier. That doesn't make it
No.
okay. That doesn't make it, like, easier to watch, if anything, it can be more stressful. And I see that on families or children, even if they're grown adults, where there's stress over, okay, do we put them in a home? At what point do we, make other arrangements? Then does the loved one, I'll just keep using a parent as an example, does the parent want that? Are they kind of putting up a fight? What does that look like? I have family friends who are kind of dealing with something similar now. Their parents' partner, so not their biological parent, with this particular partner, but has, I believe it's like dementia. Yeah, I was gonna say
Mm.
Alzheimer's, but I believe it's dementia, and, um, is not really aware of what's going on, but they kind of like made a pact that they would never put each other in a home.
Oof. Oh,
But the
no.
the financial burden, and then
Sure.
the caretaking burden and all of that. So anyway, there's so much to unpack there. So I think that is an incredibly relevant type of grief that so many people here, perhaps many people here listening,
Sure. Sure.
are coping with, and really deserves some recognition because it's so stressful on everyone. But then I always feel like there's in a lot of the cases I hear, maybe one of the kids or a couple of the siblings really stepping up, and other ones are not.
Yeah.
I've had clients where that's happened, unfortunately, where it's like they're like the useful sibling and everyone else is kind of like crumbling and just not helping and in their own world or whatever, and so it's just awful, you know? No, it's just aging is just beautiful, but so cruel at the same time, I guess.
Not for the weak of heart.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
It's not.
it is. It's hard.
Um,
It's hard to
yeah,
go through it, and it's hard to witness it in someone
yeah,
you love because of all the pieces that become, uh, obstacles to joy, I would say,
yeah,
really that
yeah,
make life
so true.
so much harder. And
Yeah,
honestly, you couldn't go through the same kind of thing with just watching a partner get a diagnosis or have a chronic disease that suddenly becomes just this ever present condition that
yeah,
limits capacity. And I think that because in our society, there's so little conversation around grief to begin with. And you talked
mhm.
about the community where we met and the Get Griefy community. And I just think of it as like a bunch of people who are passionate about the topic of grief, which makes other people sort of raise their eyebrows like, really? Why would you
It's
do
like,
that?
wow.
We need more of it
Yeah,
because in this world there's so little support. It's just to be able to talk about it with someone
yeah,
who doesn't make it about, really, you need to move on and get over it, you need to heal
yeah.
completely and then you won't be. It's like that's just not what's going to happen, and so
No,
we need
it's
to
so
have people who,
unrealistic.
right, can just hold the space with you. And that's really what I think when you're with someone who's aging or someone who just has this chronic condition that's severely impacted their life and the choices that they can make and the activities and
Yeah.
the quality of their life. I think it's so important just to be able to hold space for
Mhm.
people and hear, and when they say how hard it is, to be able to say with empathy, it sounds so hard what you're going
Yeah.
through. And that's it. Not like, oh, let's think of something that makes you happy, but
Right.
that sounds really hard. And that's what I say to my mom now. And I think it really is helpful for her to know that I'm just sitting there with her, with it,
Yeah.
with whatever she's feeling. And yeah, like
You're
it's
there, you're there without judgment, and, yeah, and we just need that, or compare, like I said, comparison or timelines or any of these
right.
false,
Timelines.
expectations that are put on people. But that's why we're having conversations like
Yeah.
this to normalize that, and look at the layers that can continue unfolding throughout our life. So, actually, perfect kind of segue back a little bit to the child that you have that had to go through 15 surgeries in 16 years, you said?
Yes.
So obviously protecting their, their space and everything that went you do not have to go into detail, of course, about, what happened or anything like that. From your perspective, what I am so curious about, and as a parent, very, very new parent myself, but I can put myself in your shoes in my own way about how that would feel. We had a traumatic birth with my daughter, so I mean, just even just that little snippet that I have of being in a hospital and the unknown, and you are just living in a state of on edge.
Yes.
There's stress, there's anxiety, there's unknown, and it's your baby. Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills again as I'm saying this. It's gonna be that kind of conversation. I can already tell. Um, just unimaginable for many people. Well, maybe it's actually, I'm kinda gonna correct myself on that a little bit. It's probably unimaginable for a lot of people, but I always like to encourage and empower people that, like, you can actually imagine it. That's, like, really where I think this empathy conversation comes from. Because I know I see this a lot. I don't know if you see this a lot kind of in your community where people are like, "Oh, I can't imagine what you're go." Well, you could
Yeah.
begin to in your own way, that's this whole process of kind of putting ourselves in other people's shoes.
Right,
That
right.
all being said, I will stop talking because I wanna just ask you, like, what that was like for you. How did you cope? Because and I really wanna ask you that because if there is anyone listening here who maybe it's a child or just another, person in their life who is, let's just say, navigating some health issues or something like that, how do you function? How do you show up for them while also maintaining your sanity and your
Mm.
mental health through all that? Because I just, that's such a prolonged period of time that you had to go through that.
Yeah, it was really long and intense. I'll say that, therapy was really helpful, good
Mhm,
friends, my partner, my my mom, my mother-in-law, they were very, very supportive throughout, and that was critical. And family just in general was critically important for support. But
mhm,
I think the thing that changed everything for me was the day that I realized that I needed to just be present in the moment and not be lurking in my past or in my future. So I'm a worrier and pretty much a catastrophizer by nature. And I'm a 4 on the Enneagram for anybody interested in the Enneagram, which it's like the tragic story is my story always. So um, I spent a lot of energy worrying about what was going to happen to my kid if he couldn't have this life that I had envisioned for him in the future.
yeah,
You have a child, they have a personality, you're
yeah,
figuring them out, and you have all sorts of dreams for them and expectations. And it seemed like everything, had to totally change
yeah,
to a different road when he started being treated for this condition he had. And so I was worrying and worrying about his future. I was also grieving who he had been and
mm,
this really, like I said, carefree, he was actually really a scamp, and he was my kid, he was my second child. My first one was like a typical first child who did
yeah.
everything the books the way the grown-ups wanted, and my second child was a typical
Love
second
that.
child who broke all the rules, but
Too funny.
he got really cynical and dark,
Mm,
and I grieved the loss of this happy-go-lucky kid. And
yeah.
there was a day we lived out in the country in Sebastopol, California, which is wine
Beautiful
country.
country.
Yeah,
Yeah.
dairy country, ranching country. And we had miniature donkeys. And my meditation every day was to go out and shovel manure. And I was out there one day with my
Love it.
donkeys, shoveling manure, having a little conversation with myself. And I realized that I was spending I was like not present in the moment. I
Yeah,
was in the past grieving and I was in the future grieving actually and
yeah,
worrying, but I
for sure.
wasn't right here, right now. And when I thought about it, right here, right now, everybody was fine. My
Yeah.
son was fine, my other sons were fine, I was fine, the donkeys were fine, everybody was fine. And, that couldn't be that wasn't the truth every single day, but
Of
that
course.
day, I looked
Everything was
around,
fine.
everything was fine. And I
Wow.
thought, if I'm not here right now, I don't get to actually experience fine. And all I'm doing is worrying and grieving and worrying and grieving. It's like, that's unsustainable.
Right. Yep.
So I just started to practice, Ram Dass said, be here now. And
Mhm.
I just started to practice that. Be here right now in the present. Just a really common Buddhist teaching,
Yeah.
and it really made a difference for me. It made a difference to be able to check in with myself and everything around me and say,
Mhm.
I don't have to worry at this moment
Yeah.
about all those stories because right now I'm safe and he's safe, they're safe. It's okay. So
Yeah.
that was significant.
Oh, that is powerful. It's, so, like, simple on paper, right? Like, I feel like if somebody were to hear that, like, "Okay, be present. Yeah, I got it." No, like, putting that into practice, I think it is one of the things that I often hear is the most difficult for a lot of grievers that I coach or just anyone I
Sure.
come in contact with. Even if you're not grieving, just staying present can be so
Right.
hard. You're just maybe you're like you were saying, you're worrying about something that happened a few days ago or something at work or whatever, or you're stressing out over, things that haven't even happened yet and might
Yes.
not even happen. And I understand,
Exactly.
people want to I'm sure there's a part of that that's a little bit like maybe this isn't the right word, but like kind of self-preservation or you're almost bracing yourself for worst case scenario. We definitely did that in my daughter's situation. I think even more so my husband, if I'm being honest, like because I'd been through some trauma with my parents. So
Mhm.
it was difficult for me with of course what she was going through, but he's never really experienced anything like that. So when doctors were like, we're gonna have to monitor her for until she's probably like 7 or 8 years old. We're not gonna know what the long-term damage of the lack of oxygen is gonna be for years. And he was like, a you know, t in such a state of shock and worry and whatever, like, you couldn't almost, like, pull him out of it. And so, it makes so much sense, I think, that people can live in that, especially with what you have been through, like, so natural, so normal to live in that state of, I guess, fight or flight in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Um An anticipation or sort of almost anticipatory grief, I would imagine that you've had
Sure,
in there,
definitely was, yeah.
um, in a way, not necessarily of a death per se, but just, just anything else kinda to come,
Mhm.
um, makes complete sense that people, fall prey to that, but it's such, a testament to, and we'll definitely get into this, having the right tools,
Yeah,
and really taking that seriously. And I don't mean, being such a stickler about it that you're not even like enjoying your life anymore, but just having tools in your tool belt, so to speak, of grief, to navigate those difficult moments. And I really, as you were speaking, the example you gave, even of picking up donkey manure or whatever, and
right.
finding yourself in this moment of reckoning, sort of like, okay, right now, everything's fine. Everything is peaceful and quiet, and it's good. It's, like, healthy right
Mhm.
now. Like, and reminding ourselves that those moments exist because like you said, it's like you'll never experience joy or or peace or anything if we don't allow even a minutia of space for that
Yeah,
to come in, and having practices like that or mantras, whatever I guess resonates
yeah,
um, with each person is so so important. So yeah, thank you for sharing that because that was just like, even
yeah.
me, I've heard that like a million times, but I don't know. I guess just having sort of a story with some context for that is like, wow, yeah, that's like a real life example.
And, it's not something you do a couple times and then it's like, "Oh, that's so
No,
easy."
it's
No,
kinda constant.
it's a practice, and
Yeah.
it's always a
It's a
practice,
practice
and
for a reason. We call it a
it
practice because
is,
you gotta practice.
and you don't get to be necessarily an expert at it ever,
Yeah,
I
so true.
still spin out on the
Yeah.
unknown future, and I, have to ground myself in the present moment, and there are lots of ways you can do that. It's not just a matter of saying, "Oh, I'm
Right.
gonna here I am, everything's fine," because my anxiety loop will just immediately get me going somewhere else without even realizing I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So, there are things I don't know, there are apps, like Insight Timer app is great, has such great teachings in there, and, just you can just lie down on the floor, like, "Okay,
Yeah.
there's actually a floor, and I am not floating, and I am not falling, I'm just on the floor." So, I know that, like, that's concrete evidence that I am not just gonna go spin out
Has
into, the future. And then my
Yeah.
creative practice is another one of those tools of, like, I when I've had fear moments or anxiety or worry, I can go make an art journal page with color and texture, and
Mm.
uh, the next time I look at it, I can say, "That's what my anxiety looks like. That's what my anxiety
Mm.
feels like." And
Mhm.
it's very validating to have created something in that moment. It also just putting my hands in art supplies is a really grounding experience,
Yeah.
even just like finger painting or something. But
Yeah.
that's another thing that started to happen, like I said, when he was going through his surgeries and we were in this place that was really hard, I discovered this practice, this creative practice of art journaling, and the first time I did it, I was like, "I feel so much relief." Just I
Mhm.
took what I was holding and put it on the page, and I kept coming back to that practice,
Yeah.
and it kept me, like I said, in the moment, and was really a grounding experience, and I could do it over and over and over, and I still do.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably looks and felt different every time too, which I bet is so fascinating to watch kind of unfold, in front of you. Okay, I definitely wanna get more into this, like, this art journal and kind of all that entails and even, like, the business that you have around it. But as you mentioned earlier, as you continue to do this practice, throughout your life, throughout all of everything that you were, going through with your son, and then throughout that starting to kind of get these hits, if you will, that eventually led you to come out. I would love for you just to talk a little bit about I really want to open it up to you in any of this experience that you want to talk about, but I think what I really wanna dig into is, like, what was sort of that, for lack of a better term, come to Jesus moment for you where you were like, I need to live my truth." But, like, and I
Mm,
really want to I know, was there one specific moment or was it just but the reason I want to kinda hone in on that a little bit is because I have actually, in my personal life, I've witnessed this, um, a couple times with, like, family friends, but we've also seen it, in society, Caitlyn Jenner being one of them. Now she was, of course, a really transition, but, like, I think of these examples of even well-known people that maybe don't come out until later and what that process was like and discovering that whether they kind of always knew, whether they didn't. I bring that up because a couple examples I have in my own life, some of them were actually quite aware of it from an early age, but because of the time that they grew up in, they were either made to, like, tamp it down or, like, they could not even recognize it, let alone explore it. The expectation was to get married, have kids, it's a straight
yeah,
marriage, you know the
right.
drill, right?
I
So,
do.
but they did end up I guess taking action one day, and they were
Yeah.
like, "No, I recognize that I'm going to, again, for lack of a better term, kind of blow some things up here, and this I take no pleasure in that, but I have to. I have to start living in, like, my highest, most beautiful and amazing self, and there is a deconstruction process, I think, even that you've said that that comes with that. So, all that to say, what did that process look like for you? Kind of like from when you were like, "Okay, I think I really need to, like, make this known to my loved
Do
ones."
this thing. Yeah. Well,
Big question, I know.
uh, yeah, yeah, it's like, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
There's something called compulsory heterosexuality in our
Mm,
culture, which basically is if there's a spectrum of sexuality and sexual expression, and gender is different from that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
sexuality, um, there's an assumption that heterosexual straight is the like ground zero of that spectrum.
right.
And so we grow up in a world where everyone is assumed to be
Mm,
straight
like,
and
totally straight.
every yeah, totally straight. And I believe that it's way more fluid than that. I
Yeah,
don't believe anymore that everyone starts like that straight is the middle point of it.
yeah.
And that's because I think there's a lot more sexual, I was going to say sexuality, but
Mhm.
sexual fluidity in the animal kingdom, and
Mm,
humanity has had periods of time where queer expression and queer sexual partners was way more acceptable than it is
yeah,
right now,
yeah,
especially in this country right now. So
yeah.
anyway, we grow up with everyone around us, and especially religion, um,
Yes, I've seen
imposing
that
on
too.
us heterosexuality.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's punishment. There's like a terrible consequence if you veer from that. I didn't actually have that in my life. I grew up in a liberal, educated Jewish family. We weren't, my parents, to my knowledge, were not homophobic, but I was the first child. Like I said, I was a good girl. I did not break rules at any
Mhm,
point.
mhm,
And so, honestly, it never occurred to me to explore it. I also grew up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and then college in the 80s. And I did know queer people, but I didn't really know that I was anything other than curious and friendly with them.
mhm,
And it didn't start to occur to me that something was different from straight until I was well into my marriage and had
mhm.
kids. And I just started having questions and thoughts. And it was like they would not go away. They just wouldn't.
Yeah.
They would go underground for a while,
Mhm,
but it just kept coming back up. And I was like exploring the question in this very clandestine way. Like when my husband was away on business, I would watch The L Word, or I would
mhm.
read a book about a woman who came out late. I mean, I would
Yeah,
erase I would erase my search history, which was very innocent, mind you.
yeah, yeah.
It
But
was I
still,
was
there's
just
just
yeah, I was just trying to read books, like memoirs by women who came out late because it was definitely occurring to me. It
yeah,
was definitely a longing I had, but then I didn't want my husband to see that I was doing that
of
because I didn't want
course.
to talk about it with him.
Yeah,
And I did ultimately talk about it with him, but, I didn't wanna deconstruct my life, and I didn't wanna hurt people, and it just really, especially because at that time, I also had this child with these serious medical situations, and I had
yeah,
3 children, and I was, fortunate enough to stay home with them and homeschool them, and it's just like I didn't want to.
yeah, that's
I didn't
so
know
much.
what was it I was even asking for. I didn't even know, you know?
Right, right.
And then honestly, it became an issue of I didn't wanna die without having had this experience. I
Mm.
felt
Oh my
the
gosh.
need to be with women, and
Yeah.
I had a friend who told it at some point she was, like, 15 years older than I was, and at some point, I learned more about her life. She when I met her, she'd been married for 30 years to her husband, but she'd been with women and with men sort of, like, back and forth throughout her life, and I was able to finally have a friend I could talk to and say, "What was that like? How did you know? What happened?" And then
Yeah.
say to her, "I have something I need to tell you." And so she supported me, but still was not willing to hurt my husband. I just was not.
Yeah.
And then
Oh my
I met
gosh.
I met someone, and it was like, I don't know, I can't tell you other than it felt divinely held. I met
Mm.
her
Oh
at
my
my
gosh.
synagogue in a service. She was a I have chills too.
I
She
know.
was she
This
was
conversation today is just, getting me. Oh, but
she
how
was
beautiful. Oh my
a
gosh.
really interesting person, who was like a guest chant leader at our Shabbat service. I was helping lead. I'm a singer, and I was helping lead also. And we got to talking, and I didn't even know she was gay. And uh, but I just knew. I met her, and I was just like, okay, here we go.
Oh
And
my
it was
god.
like the universe was like, get on with
Here
your
you
life.
go.
And
You ask, or even if you didn't, and you shall receive.
right,
There you
yeah, I did not ask, and
If you ever
it
needed a
just
sign, here's a
it
beautiful
was
one right in front of you. Oh my
It
gosh.
was just really like I just knew. I just knew it was time.
Mhm.
And, uh, honestly, that person was not in my life very long, but I call her my catalyst, and
And for a reason.
shortly after that and shortly after, I had that moment with my husband where it was like, "Okay, this is what's happening," and,
Yeah.
um I joined a group on Facebook actually of late in life queer people. And what I found was like so many of them had a catalyst, had someone
Yeah,
in their life
I
they'd tried,
bet.
they either were clueless about it or they had tried for a really long time to deny this. And then they met this person, and it was like that was the one who just like whoop, catapulted them into the next chapter. And it just at that point for me when I met her, it was like it was not a choice. It was I had to. I had to go figure this out.
Yeah.
And I did. And, I don't know, your listeners probably aren't used to people talking about this kind of thing on your podcast, but it's like
No, it's come up.
the first time
Mhm.
I had a sexual experience with this woman, I was like, "Oh my god.
You're like, "Oh,
Who
there
is
it
this
is."
person? Me. Who is this person? I've never met this person
Oh
before."
my god.
And I couldn't it's like, that girl's not going back in the bottle, that genie, it's like, she's
Yeah,
not
and
going
you're in
back.
your mid-50s at this point,
I
right?
was
Like,
56.
oh my god. To
And
have that moment, like, I just
yeah,
wow.
it was an unforgettable experience of encountering myself
Yeah,
and saying, I must. I
yeah,
must be with this person who is me. The
yeah.
me I never gave any oxygen to for 56 years.
Wow.
And all these people in my life were like, "I don't understand. You always had boyfriends." I
Mm.
was like, "I don't understand. How do you think I
I'm also
feel?"
here trying to
Like,
figure it out, okay?
seriously. So,
Oh
yeah.
my god. Oh,
So,
what a journey.
and then I was at that point, I had an art studio. I was teaching art journaling. I was doing deep dives with people. I was doing shadow work with people. I
Mm.
had gone back to grad school. I had all this extra training to help hold space for people going through huge life transitions. And here I was, like, really unpacking some seriously deep stuff. And I started art journaling specifically about my coming out
Yeah.
story. And it's just day after day after day was making art about what was happening for me, for my husband, for my kids.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of grief in there. There was also a lot of just like exhilaration and
Yeah.
fear and being just carried along on the wave, the current of my life without really directing it for a little while, just like, here we
Right.
go. And then moments where I was just like hanging out, have no idea where I'm going to end up, no idea what's happening, and how in the world did I get myself into this moment?
Oh
I
my
just
god.
I just had to keep paddling basically,
Oh
to
my
get
god. Yeah, there's no choice at that point. I think it is so amazing and crazy and interesting how you already had this practice, right? But then
Mhm.
to do it on yourself in such a way, right? Where I just think it's such a beautiful full circle moment where you are leading others, but then you are being so led
Yes.
on your own journey, right? And just oh my gosh, the healing, which I always like to say kind of is continuous, but then the expansion and the growth and this amazing transformation that you're going through. Um, so I'm so curious with actually this perfect segue because I wanted to sort of start wrapping it up and talk about your art journals and what this looks like and what the process and if people wanted to do this themselves or either with you or just explore this medium. Can you go into a little bit more detail about you already kind of talked about the process, but like even down to like what mediums do you use? And do you have any kind of like, I guess dare I say like grounding practice or exercise as you're about to journal and what does that look like? Because it honestly this sounds so like, again, just transformative and amazing, but also very relaxing, I
Mhm.
would imagine, because, well, at least it would be for me because, you kinda just are able to not even zone out, but, like, just I just know art in my own life has my dad was an incredible painter and sketch artist, and that was, something he was also very good at, but I think it was a little bit of a not escape, but just, kind of cathartic process too. So I would imagine there is definitely a bit of a catharsis that people can feel
That's
as they're doing this, but also these aha moments that they might have that they might not otherwise. So yeah, what does just that process look like? This is just so wonderful and unique that I don't hear this very often. So I love it.
yeah, it's not that common to work. I'm a coach
Mhm.
who works with people on grief through
Through
creativity.
art. Yeah, it's like I've heard that, but not quite in the way that you do it, which I think is just so unique and awesome. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and so art journaling, so this is what I teach my people, whether they're working with me one-on-one in private sessions or they're in one of my deep dives or they come to a retreat at my studio.
Mhm.
Art
Mhm.
journaling is, at least the way I do it, is in a sketchbook. It's using paint and other mediums like crayons and pastels and markers and things like that, and collage and journaling. And so it's like color, images, writing,
Mhm.
and it can be three-dimensional texture, things like that. But it's a no rules creative practice. So it's like we're not there to make a work of art. And it's
Yeah.
really, really personal. No one is walking out of the studio with a carbon copy kind of image of a sunset. Like everyone,
Like a
I
sip
tell
and paint
people,
or
right?
something.
I tell people
No
that
shade to sip
it's
and paint,
okay.
but
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I
Yeah.
just it's the opposite of what I teach. It
Serves
really
a
is.
purpose, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I it's not just about making art, and it's really about the process of the creative expression, but
Yeah,
it's one part of it is the creative process. So it's like embracing the mess. Like this is going to be messy, it's going to be complicated, it's going to feel chaotic, but you got to embrace that and keep moving through it.
yeah,
It's about being with the process, trusting that it's unfolding as it needs to unfold, you're right where you need to be, that kind of thing. But it's also about honoring yourself. It's telling your story. It's giving yourself permission to do this, to be in this place. It's trusting yourself that you can handle this. Like you can handle telling your truth through this process. And then it's about being connected in community and being witnessed. So whether that's I'm witnessing you and just it's you and me, but it's about being seen and known and heard, or it's a whole group of people who are witnessing you and holding space for you and hearing you tell your story and seeing the work that you've done. All of those three things, the creative process and honoring yourself and witnessing, are linked together, woven together like a cloth to create a situation for you to transform your experience. So you totally can do this by yourself. And in that experience, you're going to witness yourself. You're
Mhm.
going to say, wow, look what just showed up on my page. Holy moly, that's my truth right there. And I'm very proud
Yeah.
of myself. And I need to have a few deep breaths right now,
Right.
And you can do it in a group. And it is an amazing experience to be in a group of kindred spirits. The people who do my grief programs, their words are, you are the only people I feel like I can tell this to, because they know they've seen what comes out, like
Mhm.
the hard stuff that they've allowed to come out onto the page the way they've expressed it, and then they can tell their hard story and everyone in that circle can hold it for them. And it's a powerful experience to be able to tell your story without having to hold back, and
Right.
really you're expressing some really raw emotions.
Mm.
um Another piece of this work is that the book itself is not a canvas. It's like you get to take this sketchbook and close it at the end of the day and put it on.
Mhm.
It's private, and it's also not a work of art. Again, it's not something
Right.
you're gonna hang on the wall and go
Right.
with have make sure it goes with your couch.
Right.
It's just creativity. You're getting out of your head and you're
Yeah.
expressing everything in your heart and your emotions on the page with all these art supplies. And so you're also taking care of your inner child. You're like letting
Yes.
yourself play with art, and that feels really good. And you're just not putting yourself through any kind of pressure of how this has to be shared
Right.
with the world. It's really
For
just
you, like, it's
right. It's for you.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, just pure, unadulterated creativity, and I love that so much. I love so much what you just said about kinda getting in touch with our inner child and just playing too. That has really come up for me, like, especially recently, I think ever since I had my daughter, which is about a year ago now, but I think even more so now that I'm, like, literally seeing her, like, really play and really engage, and I'm like, "Where's my inner child? Where'd she go?" And literally just got, like, this little, like, electric piano thing for my birthday because I was like I used to play piano as a child, and I was like, "I'm going into this not needing to be perfect. I don't even need to be good. I just want to approach this." It's like the first thing in my life for a long time that I have approached with pure and utter curiosity and creativity.
Perfect.
And I right? And it feels so good. And it's just like because normally I would have a little bit of pressure for it to like I guess in the piano case sound a certain way or look a certain way or whatever. And I think a lot of us, especially when we've have our experiencing grief, there's a lot of pressure to show up a certain way, for things to look a certain way, sound a certain way, the way that that we're showing up at work or for our family or whatever. And so much of it has to be kept inside a little bit. Or like to your point, which I really just want to hammer home, that we kind of can't fully express ourselves. We can't share our full story. We can't really express the depths of what we're feeling, either because we just don't have people that around us that can hold that space very well, or it's like we're the one that kind of just has to keep everything together. Um, or we just don't have people around us who get it. So the work that you do just sounds so I keep using the word healing, but like really that just keeps coming up. I mean, but also this amazing mixture of healing, but fun, but curiosity, but just patience with the process too. And I love that it's in like a journal format also because, like we were kind of saying earlier, there is such a um evolution that can happen right in front of us, and just like a journal, writing too, like you look back and you're like what you were thinking or feeling in that particular day.
Mhm.
Could be very enlightening. So I would imagine too, especially through art, what mediums you were using that day, what colors were resonating with you to use in any given moment, the textures, the whatever, can say so much about us, our mindset, kind of where we are emotionally, and how eye-opening, like, what a cool experience. That is such an amazing thing that you offer people.
Oh, thank you. It's
Yeah.
really meaningful for me to do it.
Yeah.
I
And it
I
it
love
really sounds like your soul's work in so
it.
many
It
ways.
is.
I mean, again, I don't think it is certainly, well, I know for a fact I just know these things. It's no accident you're in this work,
Yeah.
for sure. The grief work certainly, but the art, and it's clear just in speaking to you how naturally it comes to you. And also for those listening and or watching on the video, I see all the paintbrushes and everything. And is that
Right.
your studio in the background?
Yes, yes.
I love it. I'm just like, oh, you just embody it, which is just so, so awesome. So, um, I love it. Well, I really, I mean, if people are in the area and can work with you, I certainly hope they can. And I'll ask you really quick where people can get in touch with you in a moment. But if people wanna do this themselves. It sounds like it's very possible, but, and this actually kinda segues well into my next and last question. As far as being able to hold space for ourselves, because, there might be someone here listening that's kinda like, "What does that mean? I don't know how to do that." Like, what does this look like for me? How can I really put this into practice in my own life? So, with that sort of like lens in mind, my last question was going to be, just for anyone listening here who is maybe struggling, I'll just say in their grieving experience overall, a lot of us are here listening to this podcast for different reasons. But is there just any final, however you want to word this, tip, advice, guidance, word of wisdom to someone who's listening who is struggling right now, or who might like this idea of kind of holding space and having this kind of more gentle approach with ourselves, but kind of like don't know where to start? Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, I have a few things to say. One is, first of all, I work with people online and in person. So
Amazing. Okay.
absolutely, go to my website and see what's going on when
Perfect.
you hear this podcast. Another is I have a workbook just for your listeners, and you'll have I'll get send you a link so that they can click on the link and get the workbook. And it's grief and creativity prompts for them,
Love it.
invitations to
Okay.
help with some directions. But what I'll say right now is think of it like this meditative practice that we were talking about earlier. You know, the way you
Mhm.
meditate, and you just have to keep getting in
Yeah.
touch with your breath and your heart, and sort of letting go of all the thoughts, like the directing thoughts in your mind,
Yeah.
and keep it simple. So, a piece of paper and some markers or some images from an old magazine or something, but just keep checking in with what's true, like what wants to be on the page. What,
Mhm.
so if that is, you have a set of markers or something like that, go for the colors that are speaking to you.
Yeah.
Use them. Don't let your intuition
Like, don't
just
overthink
tell
it.
you what to do. You
Yep.
don't have to direct it. You don't have to make a particular thing. You don't
Yep.
have to, excuse me, you don't have to draw a picture of something. You don't have to know how to draw a picture.
Right.
All you have to do is use the color, let it speak to you, scribble all over the page, write some words. What are the words that you're feeling?
Mhm.
Do add that. Keep keep coming back to it. Go look for pictures in old magazines that speak to you about how your heart is feeling.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one example of
Of
this
course.
I
Yeah,
can share?
yeah.
So I was making an art journal page about it was a mass shooting, and it was the Pulse nightclub, actually. So it was back in 2016. I was
Yeah.
heartbroken about this situation, and I was making an art journal page about it, and I found some images of, like, young people dancing, and okay, that goes there, and some images of guns and bullets and things like that, and that went on the page. But as I was painting and writing and putting these images on, I came across an image of a wildfire, like
Mhm.
fire crackling up a hillside.
Mhm.
And I could tell, like, I was drawn to this image. My thinking brain said to me, that has nothing to do with this. But my intuitive brain, that was at least a little bit louder at the moment, was like, well, let's just hold on to it and see. And as
Mhm.
I worked on this page, I kept putting the picture on the page, and then my thinking brain kept saying, "It really has nothing to do with this." And I would
Mhm.
take it off. And then my intuitive brain would say, "Please put that back on." And I would put it back on. Blah, blah, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I was like, I have no logical idea why this is supposed to be here. I just can feel it's
Yeah.
supposed to be here. So I glued it down on the page.
Okay.
Years later, having gone back to this page over and over and over, what I can tell you is that image is the most important part of the page, because that is how my heart feels. You
Mm.
can't, there are no words to express
Yeah.
how my heart is feeling, but that image expresses how my heart feels. Wildfire, crackling, burning everything up in its path. Ow, that hurts.
Yeah.
And it really related to how my heart was feeling about this experience. And I'm so glad that I let my intuition guide me to using that image on the page.
Yeah.
And that's what I teach people to do. Like, listen to your heart, and I call it your wordless heart, and let
Mhm.
it guide you in this process to the images, to the colors that feel like your truth, and use those. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be understandable to anyone, even
Yep.
sometimes to yourself.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
ultimately, you're going to come back and look at it and say, oh, now I get it. And
Yeah.
I feel so much better, and here I am witnessing myself,
Yeah.
seeing myself, hearing myself, and, like, holding my truth. It's
Yeah.
really a powerful experience to do.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's wild. I thank you for that example because that's where so many of us understandably can get really stuck. Logical brain. What,
Right.
like questioning, second guessing, all of these things. And it's crazy. I recently, at least out of the time of this recording, just launched a couple episodes on getting back in touch with your intuition. Because
Perfect.
I just have witnessed it so many times over the years. It's nothing new. Um, in myself, but also in other people and social media and society, right? People are not listening to where they're being led. And so whether it is a big life decision, as you are well familiar with, or what is on the page in front of them. And it like and just like grief and death and everything, like sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make sense a lot of the time, or it might not make sense until later. Or, there's sometimes just no logic behind it. It just is. And so to kind of like bring in our earlier conversation, like with your example of being out with the donkeys, right? Like it just like let's just be, right? It's just we is, right? It's just like that word that we're just here right
Yeah.
now. That's all we
Mhm.
have, right?
Exactly.
We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's what's so interesting about like worrying or ruminating over thoughts of like kind of what's coming and stuff. Again, not that it's a very human thing to do that, but I think for a lot of us, especially here listening, we know we're not guaranteed anything in life, and certainly not
Exactly. Yeah.
tomorrow or anything else. So it's a
Right.
very I can just already imagine, and I'm even getting excited about potentially doing something like this, is it's just such an eye-opening process. But and that being said, it probably is a process for many of us, really releasing releasing control, really opening ourselves up, getting curious without second guessing, as I was saying, or questioning why something is there or isn't there, even looking too hard for something in a magazine to make it make sense. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to make sense. That's
No.
the amazing part of it. That's the beauty of it. Like, what's ever is meant to be there, I'd like to think is there for a reason. So,
Right, and you can have
wow.
curiosity, you can just be
Yeah,
curious, "Wow, why is this image why can I not finish this page without putting this image here?"
right.
Just curious what this means, and I guess
There's
maybe I'll find out later.
Yeah, there's probably a reason that that thought or that, whatever XYZ is hanging around. Like, our intuition is it's good, man. I mean, it really like
Yeah,
it does not steer us wrong, even though I think people can feel like it steers them wrong a lot of the time. I'm just like, well, maybe it's not, it's not being paid attention to, or, kind of like cared for, I guess, in the way that it maybe, needs to be. So I just think what you are offering is such a wonderful way of not only just self-expression and healing, but really tapping into, kind of like I said, just our highest self, our most authentic self, our truest self, hearing our inner self speak a little bit, which I know can just get so convoluted, and life and things that come up, and driving kids to sports and stuff and making dinner, and and grief and loss and everything that comes up. So um I just encourage everyone here, however your creative pursuits or outlets come up for you, explore them, have fun with them, get in touch with our youthful side again,
yes,
so
definitely.
to speak, and just have fun with it. And like you were saying, just get curious about it. But the work that you do and what you offer sounds absolutely amazing. So you've already mentioned a couple of things. This will all be linked in the show notes as well. But can you just share like where people can find you, your website, social media, all that good
Absolutely.
stuff?
Yes, my website is unfoldart.com. On Instagram, I'm creativity_midwife. On Blue Sky, I'm creativity midwife. And on my website, you can download a list of my favorite art supplies. So you can download this list and like go shopping and set up your art space and start doing this work for yourself. I have lots of free videos and galleries of art journals, mine and my students. You can book a discovery call with me. I would love to hear your story and see if there's anything that I offer that feels like a good fit. I have in person retreats that are really magical and lots of other things online, in person, depending on where you are. And then there is this workbook that I created with the creativity and grief invitations that I know you'll love. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say the second you said that, I was like, "Ooh, I am intrigued by that." That just sounds
good.
like
It's
yeah,
juicy.
yeah. Yeah, it does, yeah. That's a lot that could come out in that in a good way. I love it. Well, you are just so clearly here to just meet people where they're at in their journey, and I love it because as a very not typically art savvy person myself, based solely on skill level, but now especially after speaking to you, I'm just like, "Well, forget it. I can just, go
Exactly.
at it." That's the beautiful part. Hopefully this conversation also illuminated the fact that, like, you don't have to be like, this is completely just exploratory and all of that. So I really hope people take advantage of everything that you have to offer, which is amazing. Susie, thank you so much for being here today, sharing your story, just the depth of everything that you have been through, continue to rediscover and journey through. And I it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing everything you have.
You're welcome. Thanks, Tara. It's been great. Great
Thank you.
conversation.
I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.